President Olusegun Obasanjo says the unity and oneness of Nigeria cannot be compromised.
INEC declares Ademola Adeleke of the People's Democratic Party winner of Osun West senatorial by-election.
"53 repentant Boko Haram members undergo de-radicalization and rehabilitation in Gombe State."
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall examine the African Union choice of President Muhammadu Buhari to champion anti-corruption as the theme for the next AU summit.
We shall also be focusing on the ravaging effect of flooding across the country.
And now, many theories abound as to why Africa remains underdeveloped in spite of its acknowledgement as the most endowed and unexploited continent in the world.
Well, while some identify the lack of capacity to harvest Africa's natural and human resources and add value as the problem, others simply put the blame on poor governance, insecurity and lack of peace, as well as lack of capacity in the area of science, technology, and low level of education.
Indeed, Blessed, the blame game continues. However, it appears that many seem to be united on the theory that posits that corruption is a major bane of development in Africa, as corruption affects any positive attempt to make life meaningful for the hundreds of millions of persons on the continent.
Quite right, Kingsley. The statistics speak for themselves. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, between $50 and $148 billion is stolen from Africa annually, while another report by the Thabo Mbeki High-Level Panel on Illicit Financial Flows, commissioned by the African Union, reported that about $60 billion was stolen from Africa between the year 2001 and 2010 alone.
Now, let's bring the picture nearer home. And of course, you will appreciate how much damage corruption has done to Nigeria. Now, a Chatham House report has estimated that at least $480 billion was stolen by corrupt officials in Nigeria between independence in 1960 and year 2004.
Well, little wonder there is widespread anger over the mind-boggling figures of money said to be recovered from some public officials under the fight against corruption by the Buhari administration. Indeed, the president during the 2015 electioneering campaign vowed to fight corruption to a standstill, as he believes that if Nigeria does not kill corruption, certainly corruption will kill it.
Now, the fight against corruption in the last couple of years has been relentless and has also led to the recovery of billions of naira, as well as the ongoing prosecution of persons who are suspected of having looted the public treasury at different times. And of course, the monies that they took away, I said, have been monies made for development or indeed, you know, for other purposes connected with the public cause.
Now, the efforts of the Buhari administration have not gone unnoticed, both at home and abroad, despite resistance by some beneficiaries of corruption who are bent on discrediting the fight.
That's right, Blessing. Now, the African Union, at its 29th ordinary session in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, unanimously endorsed Nigeria and President Muhammadu Buhari to champion the theme for the next summit of the organization, which is winning the fight against corruption, a sustainable path to Africa's transformation.
Cherry News, you will say, so what does this endorsement mean to Nigeria and the fight against corruption? Has Africa woken up to the reality of tackling this monster which has stalled development over the years? What changes can we expect soon? These are some of the questions our guests will be providing answers to on the program today.
Now, the second part of our program later today, of course, will be dedicated to looking at the situation of flooding in various parts of the country as the rainy season reaches its peak. Already, there have been cases of flooding in several states, in particular Lagos, where the NTA national station, the network station,
Ahmadu Bello
was shut down, and then you had a gentleman in a kayak canoe paddling on Ahmadu Bello Way, and some other persons swimming on the Lekki Ekpa Expressway. Several other parts of Lagos, of course, were battered by rain, and they also submerged several houses. Niger State, Nasarawa, Adamawa, Delta, Anambra, Kano, among others, have also been affected with considerable damage to property, as well as, unfortunately, loss of lives.
Well, recall, Kingsley, that the Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency predicted in its 2017 flood outlook that 26 states across the Federation and as well 96 local government areas are expected to experience high flood this year. Now, what can be done to avert the imminent danger to property as well as lives? And is this situation avoidable?
Well, our guests will attempt to provide the answers on the program. That's the second discussion segment of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to this edition of the program, which of course is the first for the week, and is reaching you live, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I'm Blessing Abu. I join Kingsley to welcome you to the program today. And in the course of the program, we'll bring to you our companion segment, which include the newspaper review, business report, sports, foreign, as well as entertainment news. Right now, it's time for the morning news, and here's Lydia Bassi. It rained over the weekend, no doubt. I'm sure your area wasn't flooded.
I was working under the rain.
Oh. That's nice. Because the rain also battered the FCT over the Saturday and up till yesterday morning, which was Sunday. But there are no reported cases of
no, at least just neighboring.
Just Lagos that made the news, plus others. All right, video.
Good morning. Here is the news. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo says the unity and the oneness of Nigeria cannot be compromised under the guise of sectional agitations for the breakup of the country. Chief Olusegun Obasanjo stated this at the Palace of Olu of Warri, His Royal Majesty Onyeama Ikenwoli, during a courtesy call on him in Warri, Delta State.
And not war.
Whoever has seen the devastation of war, the destruction of war, the mindlessness of war, will never want to see war again.
To security matters, 53 repentant members of the Boko Haram group have commenced rehabilitation program in Gombe State. The former insurgents are expected to be de-radicalized and trained in various skills which will help them start their lives over.
On the day they surrender, they cease to be what? Boko Haram. Internationally accepted language for them now is I rather call them clients or ex-combatants. It is what is acceptable internationally.
Meanwhile, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, says the deployment of special forces to Kogi State has reduced incidents of terrorism, kidnapping, and armed robbery in the area. The Army boss said this at the inauguration of a forward operation base in Okene, Kogi State.
By declaring operation troops at Inike, Nagazi, and Ogaminana areas of Okene, changed the tide against the terrorists and other criminals, and served as the foundation for the peace and security being enjoyed and built upon today.
Stakeholders have warned against attributing the recent farmers' herders clashes in the Mambila Plateau in Sardauna local government area to Taraba State to ethno-religious and political sentiments to fuel division among the people. This follows a series of meetings between the state government and ethnic groups in the affected area. And to politics. Ademola Adeleke of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has won the Osun West Senatorial District by-election. He polled 97,480 votes. The Chief Returning Officer, Professor Laide Lawal of the Federal University Ekiti, announced the results after collation.
That Ademola is hereby declared winner and is returned.
The third round of the Sub-National Immunization Plus Days has been flagged off. Representative of the Acting Secretary, Health and Human Services Secretariat, Dr. Mohammed Kau, called on parents to ensure the routine immunization of their children.
It's starting, but the activity has started. The vaccinators are in the field. So this is just to ensure that the populace are informed of this activity so that they will allow their children to be assessed so that they can be vaccinated.
I'm very happy to take the polio, and for the lesson they taught us how to be neat, how to wash our hands before giving ourselves food and children. I'm very happy for that.
And to our last story, wife of the President Aisha Muhammadu Buhari has charged women in Da'awa to always support and promote federal government programs geared towards improving the lot of women in the country. This was at the 12th Annual Conference of Women in Da'awa from the 19 northern states held in Bauchi.
Various programs that are initiated and will continue to initiate in the future and will continue to mobilize and unite Nigerian women to rise to their responsibility and take their rightful positions as nation builders and partners in development with fellow men in all aspects of national life.
And that's the news for now. Kingsley and Blessing will be back after this break with a whole lot. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now it's time for us to take a look at business. And our correspondent, Abida Onyeama, who has the details, tells us first that Fitch is making a forecast of strong world economic growth for the year 2018.
Good morning, and it is a beautiful day to talk business. Economic recession has imposed on countries like Nigeria the need to be creative and innovative in the approach of doing business for enhanced sustainability. The use of the capital market to fashion out viable solutions to closing Nigeria's huge infrastructure gap cannot be underestimated. This is in addition to creating a conducive business-friendly environment for companies to list voluntarily in line with market norms. In a capitalist economy such as Nigeria, public listings of companies in commanding heights, that is, very large companies that dominate their industries in terms of revenue, market share and employment, comes with a huge benefit.
That's with a view to integrating sectors or individuals that have been left out of the economy, out of the capital market, to come and make their own contribution in terms of developing the market and by extension the economy. Listing by public companies or big corporations, these are all areas of mainstreaming the key sectors of the economy, bringing them into the formal sector for them to also get sustainable funding with a view to contributing to the development of the economy.
Apart from enhancing business performances, the capital market also gives the average Nigerian the opportunity of sharing in the process of decision-making. And still on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, closing figures last week were dominated with negative sentiments. However, Thursday saw a reversal of that trend. On Friday, the NSE ASI closed at 32,459.17 basis points to gain 0.32%. Market capitalization stood at 11.189 trillion naira. Next, the graphic summary of more details. And in other business development, the recovery in global growth is strengthening and is expected to pick up to 2.9% this year and peak at 3.1% in 2018, the highest rate since 2010. According to the Finch ratings in its latest global economic outlook, Finch chief economist says faster growth this year reflects a synergized improvement across both advanced and emerging market economies. Macro policies and tightening labor markets are supporting demand growth in advanced countries, while the turnaround in China's housing market since 2015 and the recovery in commodity prices from early 2016 has fueled a rebound in emerging markets, demanding the biggest positive forecast. And that is it on Business News. Good Morning Nigeria continues. I am Amina Nusheng.
All right, thank you very much there, Amina, for the business package. Next for us, we'll look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
I'd like to welcome Bayo Toyebi to today's edition of the newspaper review. Good morning to you, Bayo.
Morning, Blessing. Good morning,
Bayo,
and good morning,
pleasure to have you join us. I hope you had a nice weekend.
Yes.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for some of our viewers, obviously, it wasn't the same story. That in Suleja,
flood, Suleja,
Lagos in particular, Ibadan and other parts of the country. So those are the stories that we have on some of the front pages of the papers that we have with us this morning, beginning with Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint is our first. Let's take the lead story. It has a number of photographs. Flood wipes out family of 9 and 2 others in Niger and destroys 10 houses and 2 bodies recover. That's according to the State Emergency Management Agency. We can't confirm. That's according to the police. Details of the text of the story can be found on page 6, but you can see the photographs there of houses and vehicles submerged by the flood in Suleja yesterday, and also below that you have 2 other photographs, as well as public mains damaged by the flood also yesterday. That story you can also find on the front page of New Telegraph. Above the nameplate of New Telegraph, you have Lagos flood cuts ExxonMobil, Chevron and Total headquarters off grid. Lagos flood cuts ExxonMobil, Chevron and Total headquarters off grid. That's the Disco cuts power to Ikoyi, Victoria Island, Lekki and others. So those are the stories with regard to the flood from the 2 papers. There are, of course, other headlines, and we'll come to them presently.
But still on the flood, the Daily Trust, as a story captioned under the nameplate. Man loses 6 kids and 2 wives to Suleja flood. That story you find on page 4. And quickly to another story. Why National Health Insurance Scheme bus was suspended. You find that story on page 3. Leading for the Daily Trust is a story on education. Only 1 in 48 applicants get admission to study medicine. That story you find right there and continues on page 5. Then there is the graphic representation of how it's been spread in terms of admission portion. 4 policemen dismissed over 50,000 naira extortion. That story, it's at the foot of the page for the Daily Trust, page 8. You'll find us there. Federal government target 365 billion naira from tax amnesty in 9 months. And constituents set to recall suspended Representative Jibrin. That story is trending on page 57. Professor the flood.
Yes, let's start with the flood. Unfortunately, a man cannot account for his 2 wives and 6 children. This is a consequence of the flood in Suleja, that is Tafa local government in the fringes of Abuja here. One of the reasons that has been advanced is that people have built along the flood banks of rivers. That is very dangerous. The National Emergency Management Agency have persistently warned about people who are building in the low levels of river banks, and that is the danger. The other one is in Lagos. Water levels in many parts of Lagos metropolis have risen above the wading level. These are in areas that include Lekki, Victoria Island, Ikoyi, where some residents have now to move in canoes to be able to move from one place to another. Other areas include Ebeda, Ikotun, Satellite Town, and Fextac Town. And the citizens are already advising reasons for all this flood. Some say that farmers who have sited their farms very close to water drainage are the one causing it. Others say that it is the initiatives of Shylock landlords who are engaged in land reclamation who are causing all these hazards. Others blame construction work going on along Abeokuta motorway and other highways. But one lesson is obvious. When drainage are blocked, water naturally will find another alternative. Also inundated is famous Ahmadu Bello Way, where NTA is situated in Lagos. In fact, the Lagos State Public Relations Officer, Olawale Famous Cole, has announced that Ahmadu Bello Way, Lagos, is to be closed temporarily. One of the rains was said to have started on Saturday, 2 a.m., and it didn't stop until 10 a.m. on Sunday.
That's right. I mean, Bayo, that's significant. Lagos has been battered by a lot of rains since June. There's no question about that. And the one for the weekend was quite heavy, so I think this probably...
For some residents, somebody said, says it alongside Lekki Expressway, saying he has been home since Wednesday when the first set of rains for the week started, and up till Saturday, he couldn't get out.
Yes. As Bayo said, partly the problem is, the drainage capacity has been considerably reduced on account of siltation. I mean, you go around some of these locations and you find that weed, sometimes 2 stories tall, growing in the gutters. Yes. And then, of course, caused by, indiscriminate dumping of refuse. Everyone drives past and then, you assume that all is well, and then when the heavens open up, it's a different story.
To be forewarned, they say it's to be forearmed. The National Airspace Agency has warned that the tropics, particularly in our region, will be inundated with a lot of water this year. NIMET too have also warned about 20 states and 30 local governments. 26.
That's right, indeed. That's one of the topics. One of the topics that we are discussing this morning. We're having the hydrological services join us to discuss this subject matter. You have a lot of losses arising from all of this. We do hope that they're able to go to work in Lagos today. That's the nation's commercial nerve center. Let's return to Blueprint newspaper. Immediately below the nameplate of Blueprint newspaper, looters funding Boko Haram and separatist movements. That's attributed to Magu. Magu, of course, is the acting chair of the EFCC. An amnesty bill will fail, says Rep. Details on page 6. Now, just below the photographs of the flooded scenes in Suleja yesterday, you have a number of other headlines. Vegetable oil smuggling threatens 43 billion naira investments. Dangote sacked 3,000 workers, ignite protest in Adamawa. And military battling 14 security threats nationwide. That story is attributed to the Chief of Defense Staff, CDS. Counter-terrorism. Russia partners Nigeria media. That's on page 5. And on page 7, time girls spend on social media worrisome. That's attributed to the Sultan of Sokoto. And why I refuse to resign over my CCT travails. Again, that's by Saraki, Senate President.
Well, quickly now to another paper, Business Day. I have just above the nameplate, you have Nigeria may record first economic growth since 2015 in Q2. And there's right up to that, Purchasing Managers Index, as PMI trend indicates. And still on the front page, you have leading for the business day, executive legislature squabbles may slow economic recovery. It's coming from an analyst. Starts right there, but continues on page 45. Other stories, stakeholders pick holes in newly approved gas policy, mismanagement compounding universities funding challenges, Oxford Blues or Blueprint for the Black Continent. This comes from J.K. Rando, as well as Nigeria must reverse the burden of proof in corruption cases. That's another story you find there. Okay, Bayo, what I had on the front page of the Daily Trust I read earlier, only 1 in 48 applicants get admission to study medicine.
I just want to take some other headlines from New Telegraph and then we'll pass it over to Bayo to discuss. New Telegraph, the lead story is on politics. APC, that's the kicker. Buhari and Oshibajo's impeachment not possible. Two writers, senators, we are not plotting their removal. Oyegun, that's chair of APC, some interests making resolution difficult. Details of the story can be found on page 2. And below the photograph there it says, Oshun rerun. PDP now battle ready for 2019. That's according to Sheriff, one of the chairmen of PDP. McCarthy, another chairman of the PDP. Nigerians beginning to realize APC's deceit. Bayo. Well, those are comments from the successes that the PDP recorded in the Osun West Senatorial elections. The winner was the brother of the late Senator Alhaji Ademola Adeleke, who recorded 97,400 votes to defeat APC's Mudashiru Hassan, who scored 66,116 votes. And interestingly, the two compartments of the People's Democratic Party have all hailed this, that they hope with the Supreme Court judgment coming, they will be able now to come together and take the bull by the horn. They are citing the success in Osun State as a signal for the rejuvenation of the People's Democratic Party. Now, according to the story about the Sultan, Sultan says the social media is making recluses of many of our youths. They spend most of their time on social media and becoming very antisocial. The other alarm he also raised was in Wamako, where he went to launch the polio campaign for the season. And he's declared any cleric who is against immunization is a fake one. He recalled that many of us who are above 50 recall that we all had vaccinations. Everybody has this round circle on your shoulder. It was given in the early days for immunization against smallpox. Talking about this story you drew my attention to, UTME, 156,213 students applied to read medicine, and the vacancies available are only 3,205. And one student who passed was a 19-year-old girl. Her name is Cynthia Uzochukwu. She scored 233 in the last UTME examination. You might say that's a wonderful score, and she wanted to read medicine. Her brother posted on Facebook, my sister Cynthia made her jump, and when she was alive, she told me, brother, I will become a doctor to treat mom and my siblings. I laughed at her, and she says, brother, you will see. Unfortunately, Cynthia died before she could get her admission. And her brother wrote, I will always be proud of you. I'll always love you, Dr. Cynthia Uzochukwu. Yeah, that's... Dr. Cynthia, so rest in peace. Very sad. The brother was so worried that he didn't even mention what actually was the cause of the death. That's fate for you. That's right. Unfortunately, Bayo, that's a promising young lady. That's Bayo. We'd like to thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for having me. We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing two topics.
The Future Assured project of the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammad Buhari, is carrying out free medical screening and distribution of food items at various IDP camps while ensuring the economic empowerment of women through training and skill acquisition. In recognition of her efforts, wives of governors have lent their voices and support.
In Kogi State, we feel the impact of Future Assured, especially in women and children.
The Future Assured program of Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, the wife of the president, has been very assuring and still reassuring in Sokoto State. It has impacted positively in the areas of humanity, especially women and children.
Supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Now, the choice of Nigeria and the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration by the African Union to champion the theme for the next AU summit, which focuses on winning the fight against corruption in Africa, did not come to many as a surprise because of his determination to fight the menace in Nigeria and elsewhere. Here's Timothy Yusuf with his background report to set a tone for our discussion.
In a newly released poll by Transparency International, a global watchdog, 58% of Africans believed that corruption was getting worse on the continent. The report said 75 million people in sub-Saharan Africa paid bribe in 2014, for instance, to obtain official documents and access to some basic necessities of life. This is aside illegal acquisition of wealth to the detriment of the masses. It is in this direction that many posit that corruption is the single biggest threat to the growth of Africa. In Nigeria, corruption is one of the biggest challenges confronting the nation and is found in every sector of society. As the most populated country in Africa, Nigeria, among many countries, is ranked high in corruption by Transparency International and other notable organizations that monitor corrupt practices around the world. In the 2014 ranking, Nigeria is ranked 136 out of 174 countries surveyed. This result shows that there is an improvement, though things are still bad. The emergence of a new government in 2015, led by President Muhammadu Buhari, changed the trajectory as a new steam was ingested in the fight against corruption. Many suspected corrupt Nigerians, particularly public officials, were investigated, arrested and charged to court for embezzling public funds, while huge amounts running into billions of naira were recovered. Nigerians have consequently begun to realize that it is not business as usual and are having greater faith that corruption will be defeated one day. Little wonder African leaders at the recently concluded 29th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, unanimously endorsed that President Muhammadu Buhari champions the next theme for the AU in 2018. The theme is winning the fight against corruption, a sustainable path to Africa's transformation. The decision is believed to be in recognition of the Buhari administration's commitment and success in the fight against corruption in Nigeria and agitation for the return of stolen Nigerian funds abroad. It is therefore expected that President Buhari would, during the summit, provide exemplary and resourceful leadership by working closely with other African leaders, the AU Commission and development partners to collectively fashion out common programs for continent-wide application of the anti-corruption theme in all member states of the Union. The chairmanship role by President Buhari is also expected to involve a number of diplomatic initiatives to sensitize and raise awareness of the international community on the dire consequences of corruption and the collective strategies to defeat it. On Good Morning Nigeria today, experts will be discussing President Buhari's posture as a major inspiration to Africa in combating corruption and bringing positive change towards building a sustainable and prosperous Africa.
All right, thank you very much there, Timothy Yusuf, for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the studios to further amplify the subject matter, namely the choice of Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari to champion the theme for the next summit of the African Union. First on our guest list this morning, we'd like to welcome to our studios again the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama. Honorable Minister, I'd like to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we also have with us here another familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, also, of course, a familiar face of the country, Professor Femi Odekunle is a criminologist as well as member of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption. Professor Odekunle, a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
My pleasure.
All right. A blessing.
Yes, also joining us on the program, it's another familiar face here on the Good Morning Nigeria. Ambassador Suleiman Dairu is former Nigerian ambassador to Sudan. Ambassador Dairu, good morning to you and welcome to the program. Okay, Kingsley, I think we'll start off with the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, you just returned from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where the 29th AU Summit held. And unanimously, African leaders actually made a choice of our presidents and our country to chair the next summit. What's with the theme for next year? What exactly is this saying for us?
Well, it's a recognition, first and foremost, of the qualities of our president. It's a recognition, I think, of the excellent work he has done nationally. It's a recognition of, I think, the work he did in the Gambia, for instance. And it's also a recognition of a very important fact, which is that he was instrumental in getting the former UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, to host and organize an international conference on corruption. And so he's acknowledged to have really taken the issue of corruption or anti-corruption onto the global agenda. And last but not the least, Nigeria was also successful in getting a UN resolution passed on the illicit flow of funds. So there again, getting the international community really engaged in the whole issue of corruption.
What was it difficult for the attendees at the summit forging a common front, tapping Nigeria's president as well as Nigeria itself to walk around the theme for next year's summit, which is on anti-corruption? Was it a big deal?
I mean, it was a big deal in the sense that it's a big statement. It wasn't difficult to select our president. It was a unanimous choice. And I think that a lot of African countries and leaders appreciate that bad governance is one of the major obstacles to the development of African countries.
Now, what does this mean now in terms of walking ahead towards the 30th summit of the AU? What will this assignment entail for the president?
Well, it would entail, first of all, preparing a roadmap on how to make that one-year theme successful. It'll entail mapping out, basic strategies and defining how to go about it, and how it can key in to the 2063 agenda for the AU, which is similar to the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's really to ensure that over the next 1 year, the actions he'll be able to take will be effective and will articulate very much his vision.
You just dispense with this question so that before we move into some other aspects of the conversation. I mean, some persons are going to ask the question. And so look, the president is indisposed. We'll have an acting president. So what does this mean?
I see where you're now coming from. No, it's for next year, and our belief, hope, and assumption, that Mr. President will be able to make all the requisite input into making this a success.
All right, Kingsley, let's move on to our other guests on the program. Let's seek first Ambassador Daire's views. In diplomatic terms, really, what does this assignment add to what we've been doing, or the credentials of the nation in terms of fighting corruption?
Thank you for having me. First, let me say that I entirely agree with what the Foreign Minister said. It is a personal recognition of President Buhari's untiring efforts to check the menace of corruption. When he was selected or elected, it was because he felt that he had the courage and the moral authority. Moral authority in the sense that he has lived by giving personal example, leading a very Spartan life, not ostentatious. So, for we Nigerians, I think we should be happy in the sense that the President of Nigeria, the country that has made a terrible name all over the world, is selected to fight corruption. Corruption is, sincerely speaking, has not been agreed by everybody on what it means. It depends on the person you are talking to. Just like terrorism. People have not agreed on the true definition of corruption. But what we all know is that some people see corruption as a moral issue, not a criminal issue. But yes, somebody can do something that is immoral, but not corruption. But we have it all rolled into one here. And that is why I feel the election of President Buhari to lead the campaign is a big omen for us in Nigeria. It is a recognition of his personal qualities. Of course, you will remember shortly after the election, he became like a superstar. He was being invited all over the world. And he showed a determination that he was ready to do the job. And fighting corruption was one of his cardinal goals. And he has waged a relentless war against corruption. People who we thought were untouchable, we saw them being taken to court.
All right, Ambassador Daryl, still with you. Now that we know that some of those areas, even when presidents came in and they talked to some of those nations in where most of the visitation had been, proceeds of this corruption are stashed in some of these countries, foreign countries. How will Nigeria, or should Nigeria actually push in this direction to actually elicit some of those areas, or some of these countries to actually return these looted funds or cash across the different continents of the world? How do we latch on this particular endorsement to actually work on that?
You see, let us get one point clear. There is no country in the world where there is no corruption.
Certainly.
But that of Nigeria is simply because what you hear, you never imagine that such things would happen. So, for him to be selected to lead the war or to lead the crusade against corruption on the continent, which is largely responsible for the stunted growth of the country, is a good thing. I have served in many African countries, and I know for a fact that corruption is deeply ingrained. whether it is government or individuals. It has got to a state that even the government and the individuals don't see corruption as a cancer that has to be completely removed from the society. I give you an example. I won't mention the country. A parliament in that country put a term limit on the tenure of the president. After the parliament had passed the resolution, the president was informed, and immediately the governor of the central bank was instructed to transfer specific amount of money to the accounts of the members of parliament. The same day they reconvened and changed what they resolved, that there is no more time limit.
Yeah, Ambassador,
so that is the same.
Ambassador Dahiro, that means that they reverse themselves.
They reverse
almost automatically.
Yes, they reverse themselves. But when it was a high court judge that told me this, and when I asked her the equivalent amount in dollars, she said it was $500
per lawmaker.
Per lawmaker. So this means that, like I said elsewhere, when, I'm sorry to say, Netanyahu came to Monrovia to insult the intelligence of African leaders by saying they were going to give aid of $1 billion for 15 West African countries. Are we that cheap that $1,000 can buy us?
All right, that's diplomacy. Now, Ambassador Dahiro, it's essentially corruption that we're dealing with. Professor Femi Odehule, let's bring you into the conversation at this time. But of course, we know what the president has been doing in the Nigerian context in seeking to tackle corruption, plus his first tour of duty as head of state from 1983 to 1985. This is a transcendental assignment. From your perspective, and indeed being a member of the Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption, how do you perceive this new engagement of the president? A distraction or a reinforcement of the activities taking place back home?
Thank you, Kingsley. The Honourable Minister hit the nail on the head on this matter. It is first an affirmation, number one, that Africa has come to recognize as a body that corruption is a fight worth fighting because of the established relationship between that problem and our undeserved or justified underdevelopment. Secondly, it's an affirmation that among all the leaders of this continent, Buhari has put himself out as somebody worthy to be put as an index for Africa to the world, that this is a good example of the kind of leadership we want. I was, I think it was on NTA, I was pointing out that about 10 years ago, Mo Ibrahim was trying to have an African leader that manifests integrity. He was able to find one in the former president of Botswana. Since that time, that prize has not been able to be given to anybody else. To me, the fact that the African body has chosen Buhari, regardless of the condition of Nigeria, is that this leader, regardless of the situation of his country before or even now, is worthy of that accolade. I'm saying it's not the award, but it's almost similar to that. And to me, because of the problems we have in Nigeria, the problems we're having with the legislature, with judiciary, with entrenched enemies of the country, of our society now and the future, it is to encourage. It's an encouragement, as it were, to the president that we know what we are going through, but we know this fight is worthy of it. Therefore, by giving this appointment, we are saying we are with you, regardless of the situation, the status of your fight against corruption. So to me, it's not a distraction, because it does not mean that the president is going to set up an office and be going from one country to the other. It is a kind of moral leadership. It's not a question of power. It's a question of moral authority. You can imagine if another head of state, let me use somebody who's dead, like Mobutu, has been chosen to be the leader of anti-corruption in Africa. I mean, of course, the West will laugh at us. But immediately you chose Buhari, it's an indication that the country is serious. You also have to recognize that this president, immediately he came in, he got invited to the West, the rulers of the world, that is America and Britain and Germany, and because of this anti-corruption stance. And what we find now is that in the work we are doing, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, the ones Nigerians do not know has to do with how do we engage the West in making back that the illicit flows that have been occurring is actually reversed. A lot of technicalities are involved, a lot of legalities are involved, but by engaging people, even mobilizing their own population to get them to pressurize their government and their parliaments to release this money, because to be honest with you, they don't want to release the money. They talk from two sides of the mouth. On the one hand, they say we are corrupt, but on the other hand, they too are factually corrupt because they make the United Nations rules and regulations. We were part of it, but they are the same people who actually receive this money into their votes and use it for their development. And then immediately we are now asking, okay, we have agreed, you have agreed that this money is stolen. Can we find a way of bringing the money back? Then they will tell you about this problem, that problem. Then the governments over there will say, well, it's a legal process. We leave it to our courts. Of course, we know it is not that easy to leave it to their courts. And then when you do that, it could be there for ages and for ages. Whereas if they were interested, British government, American government will actually find ways to return these monies to us. But I assure you, the last conference Presidential Advisory Committee organized has to do with engaging the West, the World Bank, and our business environment, including the bank, on how to ensure that these illicit flows are checkmated and that when they escape, actually, we find a way of getting them back. But that is a long process. But to revert to the original point, the original question you raised, it is a plus for Nigeria. You also remember that we in terms of corruption at least, we are a pariah nation. Don't talk about terrorism. In terms of corruption, we are a pariah nation until this president came in. So the fact that his colleagues chose him unanimously is not only a benefit to him as General Buhari, as President Buhari, but it's also a benefit to this country that our profile, despite the internal wranglings and hiccups we are experiencing from the court legislators and others, it means that internationally people are saying this country is getting serious on this matter.
All right, Professor Femi Odekunle, thank you very much. Let's get back to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama. Africa is blighted by corruption. And there's several examples that can be cited that do indicate this, whether past or to a large extent present. Why is the continent just waking up to this realization and now say, look, let's champion it for next summit?
Well, I think it's probably because the present crop of African leaders are engaging themselves personally in the development of Africa. They've come up with an agenda, a roadmap for African development, and they have set about the reform of Africa and institutional reform. And you can see from also their engagement in AU meetings that, that they are now personally invested in African development. For instance, they've taken a decision that, you know, AU meetings, summits, that the presidents themselves should be there, that they can't be represented by anybody else, possibly by their vice presidents, but nobody lower, because they feel that it's now time for them to be really engaged and not delegate to anybody else. So this feeling comes out very clearly. They chose President Paul Kagame to drive the institutional reform of the AU, and they've had, you know, one or two other presidents, the president of Chad, Déby, and now the president of Guinea, who are really determined. So we really get the impression now that the African leaders, they no longer see these AU summits as talk shops, you know, and they've put in place a mechanism in the African Union Secretariat to oversight, as an oversight mechanism on the implementation of decisions taken by heads of states. So they're really putting in place the building blocks to start delivering and start implementing. So I think that's why this issue has come up now. In the past, and I think President, a late president was mentioned, that might not necessarily have been the case. You probably had a situation where African leaders at the continental level were much more engaged with other priorities, and you had a time when the late President Muammar Gaddafi was really almost running the show alone, and I think the objective then was a lot more on mechanisms to promote greater integration. But now we're seeing that the effort is directed more at all the elements that lead towards, all the building blocks towards development.
Okay, Honorable Minister, for AU, of course, is seeking exemplary attitude from our president as well as the country. And earlier on, I talked about the aspect of looking towards some of the countries that this illicit flow had actually moved into. What are the leaders saying in terms of coming together to actually push a common front in terms of taking back some of, especially those that have gone to the West, alongside other African countries that some of this illicit flow will have gone into? What are they saying in diplomatic languages?
Yeah, well, it's a good point you make, because one of the points that came out very much under President Condé of Guinea, he emphasizes time and time again, is that Africa should now always, on all issues, be speaking with one voice. And they're determined to have this be the case. You know, in the past, it's been fairly easy to, you know, divide African countries. So that's the basis that's now being laid. For instance, I'll give you an example. They said that when the European Union comes to discuss with Africa, that individual African countries should not be their interlocutors, that it should be region to region, you know, so that they don't, you know, overwhelm individual countries. And they pointed out on the issues of the reform of the United Nations and all the other global issues that a mechanism should be put in place to ensure that Africa is always speaking with one voice. And interestingly enough, one of the points that was alluded to in coming up with that was a recent political crisis in the Gulf. As you know, with Qatar and some of the other Gulf and North African countries. And you might have noticed that some individual African countries have taken sides in the matter. And they're pointing out that this should no longer be the case with Africa. Whenever we are dealing with any global issue, we must, as an imperative, speak with one voice. So the same thing with this, you know, this corruption thing, answering your question, how Africa is going to engage with countries that are invariably the recipient countries, and it'll make all the difference. It will be to speak with one voice, and we have the legal mechanism to support that with the UN resolution on the illicit flow of funds.
All right, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, thank you very much again. We'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Ambassador Suleiman Dahiru, on the basis of what has been discussed and what has also been reported, is Africa ready to turn a new page in the fight against corruption, against the background of what we know about political governance in a number of African countries? The sit-tight syndrome continues to persist, just as the example that you have illustrated. How potentially challenging is the new task that the AU is imposing on itself coming forward next year, in which President Muhammadu Buhari is taking charge of right away?
You see, when things go wrong, you blame the leadership. What I can say is that African leaders are now realizing that mistakes were made in the past, and they are ready to make corrections. And I believe they are learning from Nigeria on how to fight corruption. Because they are learning from Nigeria on how to fight corruption, internal changes are taking place in individual countries. When you listen to what is happening in Ghana, what we hear is happening in South Africa, is happening in other places, it means that people are now realizing that it cannot continue like that. So, what will President Buhari start from? From where will he start? In my opinion, the personal example he has already shown. What African leaders should try to emulate from him is to govern with honesty and justice and shun all forms of corruption, whether institutionalized, whether it is active or passive or whatever. Let them know that we need to change our focus. The focus now is on development. Africa cannot continue to live on the handouts from the developed world. Africa has the resources to manage itself very, very well if these resources are properly harnessed. So, like what they started before African peer review mechanism, maybe they have to start meeting among themselves, whether it is AU as a body or the regional groupings, that things have to change and the development goals that have not been moving the way they should move, we have to refocus our attention and make sure that things are done the way they should be done.
All right, quickly, Ambassador Dairo, before we let you go, because we have to bring in another guest. The 29th AU Summit also looked at harnessing the demographic dividend with the youth. Now, these are a set of young persons on the continent trying to actually move in that quick, get rich quick syndrome. Now, how can this fight with corruption actually be brought in to actually bring on this development and change the narrative that we have for the continent?
You see, I feel very sad with what is happening with our youth. Any country that neglects the youth is caught in for trouble. We have youth who are highly educated, but unfortunately, they cannot get anything to do. We are seeing the waves of movement to the west, where young educated people are perishing, whether in the sea or in the desert of the Sahara. We have to reorientate ourselves with the issue of the youth. We have to find a way of bringing them on board. But at the same time, it is not just bringing them in. The youth also have to show that they are honest, they are sincere, and they are ready to work for themselves and for their countries. It's not just bringing them. If you look at what is happening, I'm sorry to say, most of the corruptions that you see are done by the young people because of get-rich mentality. We have to de-emphasize this get-rich mentality, especially if you are a public servant. I personally feel that any public servant who abuses the office he occupies should be sanctioned. But unfortunately, all over the continent of Africa, you get the youth who are invariably given positions they don't deserve, and they are protected because of the families they came from. This has to stop. We have to do things the way it should be done. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to call the bluff of people who think that because of where they come from, they can do whatever they like. We tell them, no, you cannot. This is the way we can move the continent forward.
All right, Ambassador Suleiman Dahiru, Nigerian former ambassador to the Sudan. Of course, he also had several tours on the African continent as a diplomat. Ambassador Suleiman Dahiru, our pleasure that you were able to share your thoughts with us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll take viewers' reactions. You can see the Twitter handle there at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen at NTA GMN, and another guest will also join us. We'll still have with us here the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs as well as Professor Femi Odekunle.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Together, no matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together. Let's stop fighting each other. Let us live as one. It doesn't matter where you come from, your tribe or religion, man, woman or child. It doesn't matter who you are. Put Nigeria first. No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together.
How can we develop when we're always in crisis? Families have become refugees in their country. No matter our differences, show some understanding.
No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Before we signed off, Ambassador Dahiru, we indicated that we had some tweets and that another guest will be joining us. We have with us in the studios now Mr. Jaye Gaskia. Mr. Gaskia is an active citizen, as he says, of course, a member of civil society. Mr. Gaskia, a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, now just before we pop questions to the guests, including, of course, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs who is still here, let's quickly take some of the tweets that we have right now. Mike Ayako tweets. Now, that's a very good choice. That's the choice of President Muhammadu Buhari to lead the anti-corruption team, to lead the preparation work for the anti-corruption team for the AU summit next year. Now, war on corruption is a continuous process. Governments should not be complacent.
Another tweet from Obianuju. Good morning to you all. In fighting corruption, they should exclude political parties, regionalism, and other forms of sentiments. All we need in Africa are equal rights and justice. Choice of President Muhammadu Buhari, to me, is a perfect one.
Sani Makalomakoji has this tweet. I'm particularly happy for the choice of President Muhammadu Buhari to spearhead this for the AU summit next year.
From Sani Michael Omakoji is this tweet. Honorable Minister, if President Muhammadu Buhari is unable to champion this task because of his health status, would it be transferred to acting president?
And then we have this from Comrade Tomori. Excuse me. Excuse me, please. It says Nigeria leads and others follow. That's the essence of being the giant of Africa. Up Nigeria, Tomori tweets.
Another tweet from Sani Michael Omakoji. While wishing President Muhammadu Buhari quick recovery to champion this cumbersome task, he is hereby advised to use technology in his fight. Ibrahim Tudu tweets, now Buhari's selection to lead the AU anti-corruption fight is a clear recognition of his effort in Nigeria. It will also boost Nigeria's anti-corruption war. From Innocent Yawa James, President Muhammadu Buhari is leading by example. That is why Africa wanna follow the trend. But in Nigeria, corruption is stronger than those fighting it because it's vivid. Now, Bright Irene tweets, now the war against corruption in Nigeria has been long overdue, but we ignored it and nobody knows why. All right, now those are some of the tweets that we are taking in the meantime. Just before we bring in Mr. Gaskia into the conversation, let's return to Professor Femi Odekunle. Professor Femi Odekunle, almost invariably, I mean, the comments from the guests that we have in the studios are setting agenda for the president's assignment, the AU assignment, namely what to do in terms of developing the various things. From your perspective, what would be perhaps the most effective mechanism to incorporate as suggestions, as working papers or working ideas for all of this? With the corruption, the fight against corruption on the African continent, will it be government-led, civil society-led, or led by various regional blocs, considering the 50 or 52 odd countries that are on the continent and the difficulty of coordination?
To my mind, it will be a combination of this, but in Africa, because the dog does not, the tail does not wag the head like abroad. It is the head that wags the tail properly in the African countries. Whatever the leaders do, usually the people follow. In terms of, if you look at the Nigeria history from Gawan to up to now, if the leader manifests corruption, the people oblige. If the leader insists on being tough against corruption and indiscipline, the people follow. So I would say that yes, it's a combination of all those bodies you have mentioned, but the leadership is important. The political will is important. I mean, take the case of Nigeria. You know, the civil societies have been here, other bodies have been around, but you see, until the leadership of Nigeria decided that I'm not going to have it, this is actually the top of my mantra, I'm going to fight corruption, then people, even people who are perpetrating corruption up to this minute, they cannot come on TV and say they are for corruption. Everybody is against corruption. It's just because the leadership is determined and is serious. And for Africa, of course, that creates a problem because we have different stages of development and different attitudes. Take Ghana. Not long ago, Ghana, through the efforts of civil society and the press, got rid of about 20-something judges in one first sweep. Okay, but if the government was not in support, the leadership of the country was not in support, that could have been sort of sabotage. But because the leadership supported it, the civil society, the press, was able to actually carry out what they did. In South Africa now you have a problem in which the population are insisting, as it were, they don't want to follow the path of Nigeria, so they want to fight corruption before it goes entrenched. So they are actually on the throat of Zuma. But the demand of democracy, the survival of ANC is actually contending with such forces. Then you take the question of Kagame. Kagame is a bride of Africa now in terms of development. He has turned a country that experienced massacre and genocide maybe two decades ago to a pride of the continent in terms of development. But, and I apologize for this, it is because he did not tolerate unmoderated democracy. I like democracy, but democracy had to be moderated. Our rule of law, they have to be moderated by common sense, by the interest of the collectivity, that what is in the interest of now and of the future. I'm not against any illegality. I'm just saying that we cannot afford the so-called unmoderated democracy they claim to have in the West. And it's a claim because actually we know what they do on the ground to make sure that the interest of the state actually overrides any individual or group personal interest.
Okay, Professor, definitely. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Mr. Gaskia at this point. Yes, this is a new task. Well, this task is already ongoing. And for a country, it's there is a term, corruption is fighting back. Same thing you're seeing over the continent. Now, how do we begin to help in this new determination by African leaders to actually to stem this scourge and actually bring to bear what it's intention to actually present a common front? How do we, as against the background of weak institutions as well as other areas of fighting corruption?
I'm glad you ended on the note of weak institutions because that was where I was going to, coming from. Because for me, what I think is really the implication of President Buhari's selection by his peers to lead this is that apart from being a recognition of what he's doing at home, apart from being a recognition for Nigeria, and as perceptions go, that is very important. But also, I think that even for Nigeria and for President Buhari and for the current regime, the implication of this is that if you have to deal with corruption at the continental level, on the African continent, then the question of institutions become even, stronger, more important. So therefore, even as a lesson for what needs to be done at home, the necessity for institutions to become very strong, so that this is not just because of the president. Because I mean, like Prof said earlier, a while ago, corruption was not corruption. It was stealing, and everybody followed suit. Now everybody is saying we are against corruption, but that's because individual leadership. So we have to strengthen institutions, and then so what do we need to do to strengthen institutions? Let me just use Nigeria as an example, and then maybe we can extrapolate that to Africa. So in Nigeria, how do we fight corruption in an institutional manner? You have quite a gamut of institutions that are there. So if the Auditor General's office was doing its work, and if the report of the Auditor General, the audit report, the yearly audit report, was taken cognizance of by the National Assembly, if the National Assembly, did what was necessary with it, and sanctions are meted out, you would be fighting corruption. If the procurement units and the rest of that are also working, then you would also be flagging off, red flags before they start, So it's all of those institutions working. So at the continental level, how do we then ensure that this happens? It means that continental institutions have to become stronger. What this actually means for me is that the implication is that African governments, if they really want to fight corruption at the continental level, must begin to surrender part of their sovereignty to some form of continental institution that can, coordinate, this kind of a fight across the continent, linking the various national institutions together and then making them stronger and then autonomous.
All right, Mr. Gaskia, thank you very much. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama, the concept in international relations is a strong one, even though it's been whittled down in recent decades. That's the concept of non-interference in the affairs of all the states. And from the African continent, we have seen how this had played out in the past. Now, African leaders embarking on this journey of saying, look, we want to tackle corruption head-on, will most likely, again, considering the depth of corruption around the continent, come up against the question of interference. So what might we be taking a look at? Is it developing a model of anti-corruption fight? Or it might just be, having some transcendental protocols, by which African countries or regional blocs could cooperate much more effectively in dealing with the fight against corruption. That's one leg of my question. Second leg is, what lessons do we learn from the peer review mechanism under NEPAD? Less and less has been heard of that in recent years.
Okay, your first question. I mean, these are all strategies. I said at the beginning, our president will be the champion of this fight. And it's really for him to come up with the best way and the best approach to champion this. We've heard points made about, the importance of institution strengthening and so forth. So these are all parts of the strategies to make the 1 year of his championship effective. And it'll take some working out, what the strategies will be. Obviously, you want to, messaging, communication will be very important. And I think the point that's been made that in choosing the president, you're also, there's a symbolic and aspect of it. You want, it's like these, a UN representative for Charles and so forth. You pick people. Is branding too. Who you think their brand will best communicate, that message you want to get across. And the message being anti-corruption, you've got a very good brand. And as I said, communication is going to be very important. He's going to go around, organize events, bring out publications, and then maybe, as you say, propose legislative, legal, treaty mechanisms. We might also want to go down that road. And I think the point you also raised, which the ambassador, your earlier guest, had brought up, the peer review mechanism under the NEPAD. It hasn't gone off at all. On the contrary, this year, Nigeria is going to be peer reviewed, and the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, he's the chairperson of the body, and in January, 3 or 4 countries were peer reviewed. And I think you're right. This is also a very important mechanism because the rationale for the creation of the peer review mechanism was precisely that, for countries to peer review each other, and the issue of good governance is an aspect that they will be peer reviewed against. So you want to have some benchmarks, and I think here the President Buhari can also help in that process in identifying and establishing benchmarks that will be incorporated into the peer review mechanism, so countries can hold each other account in terms of implementation of anti-corruption measures and steps.
Can we, Professor Adekunle, is it possible to envisage Africa speaking with one voice on the question of anti-corruption, considering how, as you mentioned earlier, some leaders get easily corrupted, get easily enticed by the West or other sources or other locations, which are the recipients of looted funds from Africa?
Of course, it is possible and it's advisable, and in fact, I hope that will be the case, that African countries will speak with one voice, because regardless of the tendencies among the various tendencies among the countries, everybody is interested in receiving back illicit funds that have gone. Of course, as a digression, I can say that those Western countries are likely to turn your noses at some of the leaders on the basis that they have intelligence, financial intelligence, on the monies that some of the leaders and members of their team actually have in those votes, in their votes. So immediately those people come up and start talking about returning money, they know that they may not be serious. However, that does not prevent them from talking with one voice. Remember the matter of democracy on this continent, sometime a decade or 2 decades ago. A good number of the countries were not in tune with the democratic culture. But with 1, 2, 3 people started speaking with one voice. AU, ECOWAS started saying, well, if you took over power outside of the democratic ballot box, then we're not going to recognize you. So I'm saying there's hope that regardless of these tendencies of our leaders towards corruption, it could happen. And then just one more point, talking about the problem between leadership and followership. I don't buy that kind of argument in our system, meaning I'm with him when he says that it's the leadership that is crucial. I'm not saying the followership is not important, but because of the embarrassment of poverty, because of the supply of the population, they cannot actually do what they want. Every Nigerian on the street is against corruption, but is forced to participate in corruption. If leadership can't be serious, and the leadership goes down, not just the president, but the party hierarchy, the civil service hierarchy, the law enforcement hierarchy, the judicial hierarchy, the legislative hierarchy, if they can actually manifest anti-corruption attitude and discipline, I'm sure Nigerians will follow.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Quickly, Mr. Gaskia, we must round up this conversation now. Internal opposition, external opposition, whether internally or on the international scene. Now, what other diplomatic initiatives will you want them to see in terms of supporting this determination of the leaders?
I think that one of the things that President Buhari should do would be to also encourage citizen-to-citizen action. Corruption, the fight against corruption will not be won if it does not become a movement. If it does not leave the platform of being, a crusade, it has to be a movement. And in doing that, you need to link citizens across, Africa, and make it worth their while. Let them see why they need, to fight corruption. Once you have that, then you have a situation where leadership, emerging strong leadership, and then strong citizenship would mutually reinforce one another, and then we can get what we need.
All right. JILY Gaskia, an active citizen, he says, would like to thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you.
Our appreciation also goes to Professor Femi Odekunle, Professor of Criminology and a member of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption. Professor Odekunle, always a delight having you.
Thank you.
And also to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama. Thank you very much and welcome back from Addis.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Next topic, of course, has to do with the flooding ravaging different parts of the country. Lagos was literally submerged, indeed submerged over the weekend. We'll take a short break now.
Need a submarine.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. No be only to connect lights. Come you and yourself now. Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician who will they look for with this? Oh, Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from over.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
Now, to the second discussion, more cases of flooding have been reported across the country with huge losses recorded with the earlier warnings issued. What are the measures put in place to contain the situation? Let's take this report from Victor Azu, who was at high in a community in Niger State along the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway, where floods left a bad taste in the mouth of the residents.
For residents of High Community in Tafa local government of Niger State, an early morning shower would have passed for a Sunday blessing, except that this time it turned out to be too much for them to handle. They were jolted from their sleep by the effects of the torrential rainfall, which began in the wee hours of Sunday and continued for hours, leaving behind a trail of destruction and agony. Among the victims of the flood rage was Jibril, a resident of High who had been swept by the flood through the tunnel and across the Kaduna-Abuja Expressway. Fate smiled on him as the community rallied round to rescue him. He was third-time lucky, as he was said to have lost the battle to cling onto any lifeline a couple of times earlier as the floods raged on.
The water started from up, and the boy from there, the way come, the boy fall into the water. From there, the water carrying full under bridge here. When the reach there, I hang on top of tree. There's another person there. From there, where they will try to remove the other one, another one hangs up. From there, with about 4 group. When you reach there, we now lay rope from this side to the river. The other excluded from the rope, cross the river, come out.
These two expressway, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano Expressway, along the way is only bus culvert here. Where the water is bus culvert, and what we need here is bridge, because we have dam across. If we have rain fall like this, the dam will fill up, and when it add with the water, then the bus culvert will not enable the water to pass. Then it will now bounce to the community.
Getting him to the road was not easy, as the terrain is steep. For me, it was a wrong day to be clad in white, but as a reporter, the job had to be done. An ambulance from the National Emergency Management Agency was waiting to receive Jibril, who was not only weak but traumatized, having passed through a life and death situation.
Residents say that some of their folks are still trapped in the submerged houses. They cannot come out and no one can go in to rescue them.
NTA News also learned that 6 members of another family of 8 are unaccounted for, as only 2 have been located as at the time of filing this report.
All right, thank you very much, Victor Azu, for that report. Of course, Victor was there, as we indicated earlier, blessing. Lagos also had its own share of horror tales, you know, to narrate with regard to the flooding. NTA National Studios in Lagos, that's on Ahmadu Bello Way, had to be shut down on account of the fact that the flood waters entered the premises. The whole of Ahmadu Bello Way, part of it was also closed. Lekki Expressway and different parts of Lagos suffered that. Now we have been joined in the studios by 2 guests to discuss the ramifications of these issues. The first guest is Mr. Moses Oluwatoyin Berkeley. He is Director General of the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency. Mr. Berkeley, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much, my pleasure. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
Yes, also joining us is Dr. Victor Fodike. He's a climate change expert as well as the Director General of the African Clean Energy Summit. Welcome to the program, Mr. Fodike.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished listeners.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's begin with the DG, Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency. In your 2017 flood outlook, you predicted that 26 states across the Federation, as well as 96 local government areas expected to experience high flood in a few months. Has anything changed about this, judging